Common question?
In the first video, you have presented the biography. What is the cause of this death? What is the cause of this death?
Is that?
Common
I think. Because Juliet followed him in Guernsey and their case died from old together. Miss Krisha, have you read the cause of the death of
The cause of death of Victor Hugo is cerebral congestion or is the so-called mild stroke or ischemic stroke.
Did you experience it?
So completely, all you have to do for the group 1 and group 2, have to complete the name of the approach. So for group 1, here's yours. For group 2, you'll only have 1 minute. Your timer starts now. All you have to do is to complete the literary approach based on the common questions being asked when using. Can I have your... yes, biographical for number 1. For number 1, biographical approach. And here's your prize. And for the group 2, we have historical approach. From the given guide questions or common questions being asked for biographical approach, will you define what is biographical approach in your own words?
Biographical approach includes the aspects of the author's personal life that is relevant to the story.
Yes. How about you, Mr. D. Corisinte, for historical approach based on the common question?
With the common questions presented, historical approach would be defined as it is the deepened civilization of one's social or culture because it includes gender, race, politics, theology, and historical.
Yes.
This is with history.
That could be for the historical and biographical approach. So before we move on, let's... Miss Lalane, will you please read our objective?
At the end of the lesson, 100% of the students with 75% level of proficiency will be able to recall important details in the novel Les Misérables by Victor Hugo, relate one's own principles in life to the principles of the main character in the novel, critique confidently the novel Les Misérables by Victor Hugo using biographical, historical, formalistic, and sociological MARXIST FEMINIST approach.
Yes, thank you. So let's start with biographical approach. Basically, it focuses on the author's life, his or her historical period which influences his or her works, the context in which he writes the literary piece, and the different influences that contributed or manifested in his or her writing. So for the historical, we'll focus on the context, time and place, or environment in which the text was written or the specific historical events in which the author have participated. So in the historical approach, in your handout, I have included there the different types or different consideration you may use in using historical approach in critiquing a literary piece. So for that, we're going to focus on the context, time, and place or environment where the piece was written. And the other approach that we're going to use for Les Misérables is the sociological approach. The criteria in sociological approach is quite broad. And to limit that, we're going to focus on its subcategory, the Marxist and the Feminist. Now, the sociological approach mainly focuses on the relation of the text to the society. And when we talk about society, it includes the people that lives in that specific society. We also have to consider the ideologies, the beliefs of the people resides in the specific society, the culture that they have. So it's quite broad. So we're going to focus on the Marxist, which refers to the social classes that exist during the time the text was written, and then the feminist approach. In the feminist approach, I have read a feminist approach called French feminist approach. So the elaborated details of those approach were in your handout already. So basically, the feminine approach, the relation of the text to society in terms of feminine, is the role and image of women portrayed in the literature, the social, patriarchal, and economical oppression on women. So we'll be focusing on those areas. And lastly, the formalist approach. So for the formalist approach, we'll just focus on the elements present and are necessary for understanding the literary piece, which includes but not limited to the form, type, style, the character, setting, the plot, the conflict, the theme, symbolism, motive, and so on. But we're not going to discuss it here. I've already included the complete details on your handout. So that's it. So let's begin with the biographical approach. For us to better understand biographical approach, I have created a video. So on the video, you will be able to find text or subtitles. That includes my own explanation how it works, how the biographical approach works in the literary piece Les Misérables. Let's watch it.
I've always said that Victor Hugo's novel is the greatest source material for any musical ever written.
It's what parents read to their kids when they're growing up, and it's got this extraordinary place in the French classical canon.
The story is universal, and I probably never would have read it if I had not have actually been in this.
He describes Fantine's soul powerfully, and that just gave me a greater resolve in my performance to really go there, to try to interpret the feeling that his words gave me.
Victor Hugo was born in 1802 and died in 1885, so he covers the whole century. He was the son of the Général Hugo, who was the general of the First Empire, and Sophie Trébuchet was his mother, and she was a monarchist. And his childhood was not very happy because the couple quarrel very often. They disagree on many topics, specifically politically, and they soon lived separately. First, he took the side of his monarchist mother, but slowly he changed his mind about his father and about the Napoleonic era. So in that regard, Marius in Les Misérables is not so far from the young Victor Hugo. Here they talked of revolution. Marius was raised by monarchist grandfather and then changed his mind about his father, who died in Waterloo. Victor Hugo and Adèle Fouché met when they were 7 and 6, so they were really childhood friends. Mother's death in 1822 to marry Adèle, he was really madly in love with her. After 3 years and a half of engagement, Victor Hugo married her, and they had 5 children. I have to say that Adèle Fouché was the first not to be faithful to her husband because she had an affair around 1830 with Sainte-Beuve, who was a very famous critic and writer in France, and a friend of Victor Hugo. In 1833, Victor Hugo met with an actress who had a role in Lucrèce Borgia, which is a Victor Hugo play, and she was a very charming young actress called Juliette Drouet, and they fell madly in love with each other. Their first night together, which was on February 16, will be the same date as Marius and Cosette's first night. So it's like a hint in the novel.
We'll remember that night.
He had started to write Les Misérables in 1845 and then was interrupted by the Revolution of 1848. He had to leave France in 1852, right after the coup d'etat of Napoleon III. Victor Hugo protested and called Napoleon III a traitor of France, and of course he was banned from his country. Hugo went to Jersey. He spent there a few years, and then he was expelled from Jersey because he defended so-called terrorists in Jersey. So he went to Guernsey until 1870.
So you finished Les Misérables in good old British soil in Guernsey over 16 years.
Les Misérables was published in April 1862, and right away it was a huge popular success. About 100,000 copies were sold, and it was very popular abroad.
It is set in a particular era, 1800s, early 1800s in France, but it feels timeless.
Sadly, human nature rarely learns from itself, and all the themes that Hugo discusses in it and tells so brilliantly are happening in our world again and again.
I mean, the Occupy Wall Street movement and the French Revolution started in a similar way. They were slow burns. It took a while to really take off.
Les Misérables is one of the great celebrations of the idea that we as a mass, as a people, can rise up and change our circumstance for the better. And the French Revolution was a very painful time for France, where it took many decades for France to arrive at a new and more just identity as a society. And I think that the story gives us all hope that it's still possible to overcome some of the hurdles facing us socially at the moment.
Everywhere you have people who want a better life, a better world.
He was beyond everyone. I mean, he was considered one of the greatest men, quite rightly, that France has ever produced, and indeed the world has ever produced.
We all hope to leave a better world for our children. And Victor Hugo knew all that. The genius is that not only did he have all that in his head, but he was able to put it on paper.
One of the things that I love about the book is it's an exploration of love in all its profundity, using language that is some of the most beautiful I've ever read.
It's a colossal and masterful work, and it was a great joy to have an excuse to read it.
It's a remarkable book that just ignites your heart and, I know it sounds poetic, but just illuminates your soul.
Thank you, Victor Hugo.
So for the quick recap, I have here literary sociogram. So it's a literary sociogram, a graphic organizer that you could use to elaborately discuss or illustrate a literary piece. So we have here Victor Hugo, his parents, Leopold and Sophie. So it was his father who fell in love, or the one who first became unfaithful to his mother, to an unknown woman. So they were legally separated, and then his mother Sophie fell in love with General Victor Lowry, who was a general. So from being a monarchist or from having a monarchist or royalist concepts or viewpoints, Victor Hugo became close with Victor Laurie's stepfather and slowly changes his view. Then for the literary influence, we have here the Romanticism. It was François de Chateaubriand, the father of Romanticism in French literature, who influenced Victor Hugo. And aside from this man, Victor Hugo during those times were surrounded by people who have a Romanticist view. So, Victor Hugo from royalist or monarchist to Romanticist or Republican thinker. So let's move to his family. So having this kind of parents, legally separated and faithful, I believe that Victor Hugo tried his best to be as faithful as he can for his love, who is Adele. However, it was Adele who commits adultery first with Charles Saint-Beuve. He was actually a literary critic and a friend of Victor Hugo. Yon. That's why they all got separated, having 5 children: Adele, Charles, George, Francois, and Leopoldine. Then, he met Juliet. Juliet is an actress. So, Juliet played a role in Victor Hugo's play.
Yeah.
So, that's it. And the noble, another issue with Adele, because Eugene Hugo also fell in love with Adele. Eugene is a brother of Victor Hugo. That's why Eugene was very bitter during their wedding. And in the novel, it was, I think, Evelyn would best resemble Eugene because they both shared the same problem, unrequited love. And Victor, Juliet, best resembled by Marius and Cosette in the novel for their true love. And also, Victor Hugo resembled by Marius for his change in viewpoint and from being monarchist to Republican thinker, because the grandfather of Marius, Gillenormand, also has a monarchist or royalist view, and then his father, George Montmorency, is a general in Napoleon's army. Now, during the time that his father was dying, Marius went to Vermont to visit his father, but he arrived there a few minutes after his father died. And from that very moment, he still couldn't find a place in his heart to forgive his father, because all throughout, he believed that his father left him or abandoned him because of his grandfather. And he only found out the truth when he went to the church after his father died. And in the church, he met a man who told him a story of a man who always visited that church every time just to stalk his own son without having the courage to approach his son. So it lasted for years that man always visit the church only to stalk his son and see his son grow to a better man. And then Marius asked the man, "What is the name of the man you're talking about?" And the man couldn't pronounce the name correctly, and so Marius did is he, George Montmorency, and then the man told him that yes, that would be his name. And that's the only time he found a place in his heart to forgive his father. And also, aside from that, he found out different ways that his father did only to reach him, but was hindered by his grandfather. So, and then he joined the ABC Friends with Angel Yaras, the group of people who's involved in the barricade or the revolution. So that's for the biographical. Now let's move to the historical. So I have provided the complete details for historical there in your handout. We're not going to discuss it anymore, just read, we'll just summarize it all. So we have there the Battle of Waterloo, the background on the French Revolution, as well as the social classes present those time and prominent character during those time. So brief narration of the historical and economical events that took place during the piece was written. So I'm not going to discuss it. Instead, I'm going to show you a very short video clip to better understand the historical background.
By the end of the 18th century, Europe had undergone a profound intellectual and cultural shift known as the Enlightenment. Philosophers and artists promoted reason and human freedom over tradition and religion. The rise of a middle class and printed materials encouraged political awareness, and the American Revolution had turned a former English colony into an independent republic. Yet France, one of the largest and richest countries in Europe, was still governed by an ancient regime of three rigid social classes called estates. The monarch, King Louis XVI, based his authority on divine right and granted special privileges to the first and second estates, the Catholic clergy and the nobles. The third estate, middle-class merchants and craftsmen, as well as over 20 million peasants, had far less power. And they were the only ones who paid taxes, not just to the king, but to the other estates as well. In bad harvest years, taxation could leave peasants with almost nothing, while the king and nobles lived lavishly on their extracted wealth. But as France sank into debt due to its support of the American Revolution and its long-running war with England, change was needed. King Louis appointed Finance Minister Jacques Necker, who pushed for tax reforms and won public support by openly publishing the government's finances. But the king's advisors strongly opposed these initiatives. Desperate for a solution, the king called a meeting of the Estates General, an assembly of representatives from the three estates, for the first time in 175 years. Although the Third Estate represented 98% of the French population, its vote was equal to each of the other estates. And unsurprisingly, both of the upper classes favored keeping their privileges. Realizing they couldn't get fair representation, the Third Estate broke off, declared themselves the National Assembly, and pledged to draft a new constitution, with or without the other estates. The revolution had begun. As rebellion spread throughout the country, the feudal system was abolished. The Assembly's Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen proclaimed a radical idea for the time. After a trial, the once revered king was publicly beheaded, signaling the end of 1,000 years of monarchy and finalizing the September 21st Declaration of the First French Republic, governed by the motto Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité. A general named Napoleon Bonaparte took charge, becoming emperor as he claimed to defend the revolution's democratic values. All in all, the revolution saw 3 constitutions and 5 governments within 10 years, followed by decades alternating between monarchy and revolt before the next republic formed in 1871. And while we celebrate the French Revolution's ideals, we still struggle with many of the same basic questions raised over 2 centuries ago.
So it was mentioned from the early video that Victor Hugo almost covered the whole century. So although the Les Misérables was not written during the time that you have seen in the video took place, it is important to know about the French Revolution so that one can understand what is going through the minds of Marius, Enjolras, and other members of the Paris Uprising of 1832 in the novel. More so, it is one of the greatest influences that Hugo considered in writing this novel, for he lived during this period, giving him first-hand experience to what really life is during this era. Les Misérables, which Hugo composed from the late 1840s to 1862 during his exile, integrated his feeling about the political situation, his memories of the barricades of 1848, and his republican ideals. The novel denounces the degradation of the urban working class and society's mistreatment and neglect of the poor, especially women, children. So, we'll just continue the discussion. Is it time?
No, we still have time.
Still have time? So, let's continue. So, an additional, Romanticism was an intellectual and artistic movement that swept Europe and the United States from the late 18th to mid-19th century. France in the 18th to 19th century was in constant state of political and social unrest. Napoleon became dictator and remained in power until he was completely defeated at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. So, in the book, there is actually a part of Cosette. Cosette is the name of the book the part of the book, on the book I have read. So, book 1 there, on part 3, is entitled The Waterloo. So, it talks about the Waterloo. Later I'll explain the connection of the Battle of Waterloo in the novel and the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. So, this is when Hugo's novel, Les Misérables, begins. The Battle of Waterloo takes place near the Waterloo, Belgium on June 18, 1815. So also, Victor Hugo made himself clear. Actually, he made a disclaimer between fiction and non-fiction. So, in book 1, The Waterloo, Hugo states there that Les Misérables is both fiction and non-fiction. The historical events really took place in French history, and the characters in Les Misérables really exist. Only that some names were changed, but most of the prominent characters used the same name. So here are some textual evidence for that disclaimer I'm talking about. So it says, we do not profess to give here the history of Waterloo. That history is moreover told, and told in a masterly way, from one point of view by Napoleon, from the other point of view by the Caras. As for us, we leave the two historians to their contest. We are only a witness here at a distance. Remember when he was writing this, he was in his exile at Jersey.
Yes.
So it states there, we are only a witness here at a distance, taking perhaps appearances for realities. So that's it. And I have here Victor Hugo's idea of the French Revolution, represented by letter A. So in letter A, the topmost part, behind the point of letter A, behind the plateau of St. John in the forest of Soignes. Then the front part, Mont St. John, Wellington is here. So the right side, plateau of Mont St. Jean, the whole of the battle. Then the lower part of that, the Bellas. Then the bottom part, Hugo Mont, rail with Jerome Bonaparte, brother of Napoleon, is located here. And then on the middle part, sunken road of Ohain and brave Laulun. So the details for the name or places mentioned here will be found there in your handout. Then on the right side, the precise point where the final battle word was spoken, there the lion is placed, the involuntary symbol of the supreme heroism of the imperial god. Then the bottom part of that, the Lahal Saints, the Genape, and then lastly the Labelle Alliance, where Napoleon would be found. So this is the representation of Hugo's Battle of Waterloo from pages 114 to 115.
Why is it represented with letter A? Why is it represented with letter A?
Victor Hugo used letter A to illustrate the Battle of Waterloo in the novel. So you will find this illustration, this description on pages 114 to 115. So this is his illustration, his description. Question.
Did Victor Hugo use the Waterloo for allegorical purposes?
I think so, yes. Because he also, he was against Napoleon, especially when Charles X declared or oppressed the freedom of press, and was also one of the reasons of his exile.
Which was long freedom.
Yes. Yes. That's why I think he's criticizing the Napoleon's era. Any more questions?
In the first video, you have presented the biography. What is the cause of his death? What is the cause of his death?
His death?
Common
I think. Because Juliet followed him in Guernsey, and there they died from old together. Miss Risha, have you read the cause of the death of
the cause of death of Victor Hugo is cerebral congestion or is the so-called mild stroke or ischemic stroke.
Did you experience it?
He's so free. Follow to the left of your itinerary. This badge of shame will show it till you die. It warns you're a dangerous man. Stole a loaf of bread. Sister's child was close to death. He was starving. You'll starve again unless you learn the meaning of the law. The meaning of those 19 years. Slave of the law. 5 years for what you did. The rest because you tried to run. Yes, 24601. Name is Jean Valjean. And I'm Javert. Do not forget my name. Do not forget me. 24601.
Can I help? Day's work, papers. No work here.
Valjean, as a dangerous man, you will be on parole forever. Failure to report means immediate arrest. Be in Montalier in 30 days. Follow him.
Hey! Yeah! Yeah!
Let me see your papers. Sure, papers. Sleep in the stable, please. I'm hungry. Get out.
When suffer you are weary, and the night is cold out here. Though our lives are very humble, we have to share.
We have your silver. We caught this man red-handed. He had the nerve to say you gave him this.
That is right. But my friend, you left so early. Surely something slipped your mind. Forgot. I gave these also. Would you leave the best behind? Monsieur, listen. But remember this, my brother. See in this some higher plan. You must use this precious silver to become an honest man.
The end of the day or another day goes on. And that's all you can say for the life of the poor. It's a struggle, it's a war, and there's nothing that anyone's giving. What they standing about, what is it for?
Dear Fontaine, you must send us more money. Your child needs a doctor, there's no time to lose. It's a matter to me, it is none of your business. Put the husband at home and a bit on the side. Is there anyone here who can swear? But for God, she has nothing to fear, she has nothing to hide.
Hey, come on, stop that! Mr. Madeline's here! What is this fighting all about? Someone tear these two apart! Factory nutters like this! Come on, ladies, settle down! I am the mayor of this town. I run a business of repute.
This is true, there's a child and the child is my daughter. The father abandoned us, leaving us flat. Now she lives with an innkeeper man and his wife, and I pay for the child. What's the matter with that?
Ah, yes, the virtuous Fontaine, who keeps herself so pure and clean. You be the cause, I had no doubt, of any trouble hereabouts. You play a virgin in the light, no urging in the night.
She's laughing at you or she's laughing at me. She's nothing but trouble again and again. You must sack her today. Monsieur le maire! Monsieur le maire!
Hey, hey!
Don't touch me, leave me alone. Let's make a price. I'll give you all of 10 francs. Just think of that. and then keep it all for me.
So for her immediately.
I will see it done. Cosette, be here soon. Just live in my protection.
Jean, at last we see each other.
Before you say another word, Javert, before you chain me up like a slave again, listen to me. There is something I must do. This woman leaves behind a suffering child. There is none but me who can intercede. In mercy's name, 3 days are all I need.
I was born with scum like you. I am from the gutter too.
No more words. Here's your price. 1,500 for your sacrifice. Come, Cosette. Say goodbye. Let us seek out some friendlier skies. Thank you both. Poor Cosette. Where I go, you will be. This is true. I'll be father and mother to you. Oh.
Where's the child, Cosette?
She's gone with the gent. Didn't tell us where they went. Leave his home address.
When's this gonna end? When we gonna live? Something's gonna happen now. Something's gonna keep Where are the leaders of the land? Where is the king who runs this show? Only one man, General Lamarck, speaks for the people here below. Lamarck is ill and fading fast. Won't last a week out, so they say. With all the anger in the land, how long before the judgment day? Before we cut the fat ones down to size. Get to the king! Liberty! Before the barricades come tomorrow, we meet here at General Lamarck's house. Bring your back. Grandpa, have you any idea of the shame you bring on our family? Disgraceful people! Leave General Lamarck! Leave General Lamarck! Leave the force! Leave the force! Leave the force! Leave the force!
I have overheard their plans. There will be no attack tonight. They intend to starve you out before they start a proper fight. Concentrate their force. Hit us when it's light.
Lawyer! Good evening, dear Inspector. Lovely night there. I know this man, my friend, is named Inspector Chabert.
French Revolution!
I kept it from you. It's from Cosette.
Rain's gonna ruin the powder.
I'm sorry.
I'm here. We'll make the flower.
Gavroche,
Anything. About you. Had a bit of dust. Letter from the bouquet. Something for me, something for you. Who needs charge?
Can it be only a day since we met and the world was reborn? If I should fall in the battle to come, let this be my goodbye. Now that I know that you love me as well, it is harder to die. I pray that God will bring me home to be with you. Pray for your Marius. Praise for you. This is the day the most I feared. Now a young man has appeared to change my life. This Marius will take away the treasure of my autumn days to be his wife. But he could die tonight.
You see that prisoner over there? A volunteer like you. Spy who calls himself Javert. He's going to get it too. Get in there. Get inside.
Don't kill him. I know him.
We meet again.
You've hungered for this all your life. Take your revenge. Alright, you should kill with a knife.
Get out of here.
Don't understand.
Clear out of here.
Once a thief, forever a thief. What you want, you always steal. You would trade your life for mine. Yes, Falcon, you want a deal.
Shoot me now for all I care. If you let me go, beware. You'll still answer to Javert.
You are wrong. Your ways have been wrong. I'm a man, no worse than any man. You are free. There are no conditions, no bargains or petitions. There's nothing that I blame you for. You've done your duty, nothing more. If I come out of this alive, you will find me at Rue de la Mamée, number 5.
Doubt our paths will cross again.
We're the only ones left. The people have not stirred. We're abandoned by those who still live in fear. Let us not waste lives. Let all who wish to go from here.
Do you hear the people sing, singing the song of angry men? It's
dead bodies there, dry ammunition. Come, Post, whip through. Let's run it up. Get everything up.
Little people know when little people fight. We may look easy pickings, but we got some bite. So never kick a dog because it's just a pup. We'll fight the 20 armies and we won't give up.
Keep on what are you doing? No, I'm not running back! Let me pass him! Come let me pass!
So you better run for cover when the pup goes.
The people of Paris sleep in their beds. You have no chance at all. Why throw your lives away? Advance!
I write my last confession. Even when I at last am seen. It's the story of one who turned from hating, a man who only learned to love when you were in his keep.
already provided symbolism and motifs. Now I added additional symbolism here, like symbolism sparrow to Gavroche. I've also included lion and lynx. So you will find a definition and explanation at the bottom part.
The locations or the coordinates of Jungle Jack, because in the movie they knew it because the teenagers crashed into the wedding party of
No,
Marius
that's
and
not
Cosette.
true in the novel.
In the novel, what happened?
So in the novel, after their wedding, Jungle John exposed himself to Marius. He told Marius the truth about his identity, and then Marius wrong understanding of the events. Marius actually thought that Valjean robbed Madeleine. Madeleine is also Valjean, right? So Marius thought that Valjean robbed Madeleine. Second, Marius thought that Valjean killed Javert when actually Javert committed suicide. So Marius decided to allow Jean Valjean to live far from them. So she adopted the name of Bachelobel because after that, it was being known that name because the real owner of that name, I don't know what happened to him because he was old and he was serving at the convent. And the last time Jean Valjean and Cosette escaped, they went to that convent where actually was headed or managed by Bachelobel, and Bachelobel helped them, and later on Bachelobel disappeared in the scene and Jean Valjean as Bachelobel were killed. On the previous video that I showed, the history of the French Revolution before the coming of Napoleon, the same thing happened under Napoleon. And yung social problem, yung social class problem nila before, ganun pa din yung problem nila after Napoleon. May mga nabago during Napoleon Empire, during his era, but still, the problem of the poverty, the problem of the people, the common people are still there. Only the people who have money, who have position, are benefited.
Why did it fizzle out? I am pertaining to the support that the commoners, as you return them, the Mondays, supporting the so-called French Revolution. Why did it fizzle out?
So what do you mean by this? What happened?
They became hesitant in fighting
because they are only few and they do not have the guns, they don't have the yes.
That 98% of
Yes, 98% of the people are commoners, nothing. They own nothing because everything they have to submit it to the higher class. So even though their population is many or they are great in number, they are less in power. They are less in power in terms of authority, power, money. And then the two in the upper class they are few, but they have the money, they have the power, they have the position. That's why in the battle, the lower class use their number. So they fight physically.
So the underlying reason is still poverty?
Yes, poverty pa rin. Yung same problem pa rin. Hindi siya nawala. After the establishment of the first French Republic up to the time of Napoleon Bonaparte, that's why they continue to revolt. Yung pa din siya. So next question, Miss Laika, your question is the genre. It's actually epic novel, historical novel, and the most important theme I think is there are 5 actually, love and compassion, because Father Mariel transferred or imparted that love and compassion to Valjean, which Valjean imparted to Cosette, and Cosette carried over to her marriage with Marius, and also that love and compassion to Gavroche, Fantine, and Cosette, because despite of the negative and the cruelty that surrounds them as they grew up, they did not develop cynicism. Cynicism is a belief that everyone or general are selfish, dishonest, they're bad, yun. Yung belief na lahat na lang tao masama, yung cynicism, they still grew up and share love. Then another is the criminal injustice. Kasi in the character of Jean Valjean, after his imprisonment, he's still in prison because of his yellow passport. Criminals there, yes, even though they are out of the jail, still they are not free because of the society stereotyping, the norms, the society, the stigma, and then criminal injustice because those who are really criminals, those who are doing murder, like I forgot the name of the specific group, but there are the specific group who manage the crime within that specific place, like they kill people, they rob people, those are free. They are not being imprisoned or they are not being sentenced. They are free. And compared to John Valjean who just stole a piece of loaf of bread to live. So yun, social criminal injustice. Then, sa women, yung treatment of women. Diba? Parang it's a crime if you are single mother. Yun. Wala kang trabaho.
Trabaho?
Yes, like hunting. So, question pa? Any more question?
None.
Are you hungry?
Bakit naghahamon yun? Towards si...
Because the ruling after you given the parole, you have to report every 3 months. You have to state where you are, what you're doing, yun. But the first failed, John Valjean failed to do that. He was not able to report.
Because the criminal records are being presented every day.
Yes.
What he did was that he scratched his parole and then lived on a different life, on a different identity, which is nowadays called breach of
If we have breach of contract, we have breach of sentence. Because by doing so, those criminals will still be in prison because you have to report every 3 months to state what you're doing, your location. So it will hinder you from having a change in life, a new life.
When Hugo is already out of the imprisonment, the prison, si Hugo
Yes.
remembered him as yung number sa number niya.
601, his first convict number.
Why is it?
Because that number lasted
He's
for
still
years.
considered as a criminal, even if he's very young.
Yes, that's one example of criminal injustice during that time. That's
aside from that, Javert only wants to, parang someone observe, John Valjean.
To answer your question, Javert has no specific real life counterpart, but Javert is an symbolism for the government, but blind because he thought all the time, all his life, that what he's believing to be the law, what he's believing to be just, what he's believing to be right is really right and really just.
Yes.
There's a textual evidence on the video, I put it there. Javert realized that all my life I only knew one road, one straight line. And only this time when John Valjean released him, freed him, only this time I've encountered two straight lines and I don't know which way to go. That's why he committed suicide.
the separation of church and state.
Yes, even as we have in the Constitution, we have the separation.
They have it already in this time?
French?
Yeah, the French government.
Maybe because they are pursuing democracy. If they have a revision of their constitution of their own. But I haven't reviewed their constitution. But in the Philippines, yes, we have.
Sa akong walang separation sa Republic ng Galilea sa bahay. Kaya naman medyo mas mataas.
They're very, gulo. Yung kanilang
Yung nakaset yung standards.
Yes.
Like for example, nung nagpunta sa bahay ng bishop, parang mabilis yung responde ng mga police. Tapos mas pinahirapan nila si John.
Because during those time, imagine 1800, government were not yet really established. Unlike in our time, from 1800 pataas, we have a guide. Diba? Remember, or if you can notice, the Philippine Constitution and other nations' constitution, they are just based in French and in America. Those who are ahead, first who establish their government. They set the basis. Now, for the historical sociological approach, we have an overlapping approaches. History and social issue. First, criminal injustice. John Valjean is the Pierre Morin case in real life. So I searched for Pierre Morin. Yes, I found proof. I read an article written in French and I translated it just to confirm that Pierre Morin Morin is really existing. So Pierre Morin experienced the same experience with Jan Valjean. He also stole, yes. So that's, no, a local bread.
Yes.
Yes, the same. Another,
What brand?
next, sociological historical approach. The character of Jan Valjean was drawn from a historical person, a petty thief named Pierre Morin, who spent 5 years in prison for stealing bread for his sister's children. Hugo draws a clear distinction in the novel between those who chose crime because they are corrupt and those who are driven to it by poverty and desperation. On the other hand, there is the navire, who is by nature highly susceptible to the encroachment of evil, and there is Valjean, who stole only to save his life. Lastly, Fantine, who suffers for protecting her own child. So, Hugo blames society's indifference and injustice for the situation of those who fall in this category in the society. So, they became criminals because of the society, because of the poverty. Next, formalistic approach, theme effects of French Revolution. So, this is one theme, Gavroche. In real life, Joseph Agricole Viala. So, Gavroche's death can also remind of the death of Joseph Agricole Viala, a child hero of the French Revolution. So, like Gavroche, he was killed while adventuring himself on an open terrain between two fighting forces in order to accomplish non-hostile yet essential action for his actions. Yes. Facts. Next, historical formalist approach. Theme, love and compassion. The actual bishop of Digne during the time period in which Mayel, in French it's Mayel. Yes, Mayel. Appearance in the novel is Mayel.
Proposal sa'yo.
Bishop Mayel. Charles de Melis, he served as Hugo's model for Mayel in both the novel as well as in the film and musical adaptation of it. The bishop is a heroic figure who personifies compassion and mercy. As Hugo set to work on the novel 1848 after a long interruption, his anti-clerical son Charles, one of Victor Hugo's son Charles, objected to presenting Marius as prototype of perfection and intelligence, suggesting instead someone from a liberal modern profession like doctor. Why is it bishop? To be a symbol of perfection and intelligence. To be the prototype of perfection and intelligence. Charles, Victor Hugo's son, objected. He wanted, why not take from a liberal modern profession like doctor who saves lives? So the novelist replied, here's the answer of Victor Hugo. I cannot put the future into the past. My novel takes place in 1815. For the rest, this Catholic priest, this pure and lofty figure of true priesthood, offers the most savage satire on the priesthood today. So, still a satire for the priesthood of today. Yun, opposite siya. Mayels represents the opposite of the priesthood of today.
Yeah.
Common questions for sociological. I have the answers here. What is the relation between the character and the society? So, in our discussion, we've already mentioned this one. Next is, does the story address societal issues? So, these are the common questions for the sociological, feminist, and Marxist. And here are the common questions, biographical and historical. During our discussion, I've already answered this. And the video I made will definitely answer this question. So last, I will no longer discuss this elaborately. Last question, how do economic conditions determine the direction of the character's lives? Poor people have no right and chance to ascend or uplift their lives. Instead, they only have one direction to go. To either die poor or become criminals to live. And that ends my report.